Moscow, February 2021. The Hotel Korona was a modest property, just a few minutes' walk from the garden ring. The front desk clerk noticed something odd. In room 708, nobody had emerged for 3 straight days. The guest hadn't extended the stay, didn't answer calls, and from behind the door there was a faint odor. Heavy, sweetish, unsettling. The staff decided to unlock the door with the master key. Inside, it was stuffy. On the bedside table sat a bottle of vodka and a glass. Nearby were a set of keys, a cosmetic pouch, a passport. The bed was rumpled. Clothes were scattered on the floor. In the corner stood a suitcase, half-zipped. A phone lying on the bed continued receiving notifications, as though someone had been trying to reach out. The room was rented under the name Greta Vedler. The last time she was seen was the evening of February 23rd. Since then, total silence. No calls, no messages, no logins. Hotel staff alerted the police, but at that moment no one yet understood what had happened. It was a story in which an ordinary Moscow hotel room became the final address for a young model. Her name was Greta Vedler. By the time they found her, it was already too late. To understand why things ended this way, we have to go back in time, to the era when her story began. Before she became known as Greta Vedler, she was Greta Pavlenko, an ordinary young woman from Lipetsk. She was born on March 12, 1998, into a family where her father left almost immediately after her birth and never came back, and her mother, Lika, unable to cope with hardships, became addicted to alcohol. When it became clear the woman couldn't care for her daughter, Greta was taken in by her grandmother. Life with her grandmother was hard. The pension was small, the house was old, the furniture dilapidated, the clothes worn. But it was here that Greta's strong desire to change her life was born. She grew up quiet, but early on showed grit and ambition. Classmates recalled her embarrassment over poverty and her drive to stand out, as though proving she was meant for more. Family talks about the future usually ended in silence. Mother and daughter hardly spoke. Grandmother could only wish her granddaughter luck. So, Greta understood she had no one but herself to rely on. Her reply to a teacher who scolded her for being overconfident, "Just you wait, you'll hear about me," became her life motto. By graduation, she already knew that staying in Lipetsk would not give her growth opportunities. She enrolled at the People's Friendship University of Russia to study economics and prepared to move. At 17, with one suitcase and a few modest savings, Greta moved to Moscow, vowing never to return. This move became her starting point. From here began the rise of Greta Vedler, the young woman who tried to prove that you could change your fate if you dared to challenge the odds. Moscow wasn't exactly welcoming. Greta moved into a student dorm. Her budget barely covered food and bus fare, but going back to Lipetsk, that was never an option. To make ends meet, she worked wherever she could, waitressing, handing out flyers, even doing background work on film sets. A few months in, local photographers started noticing her look. Greta landed her first catwalk gig in a small local fashion show. It wasn't high-end, but it was a start. Her modeling career began with minor shoots, but she quickly picked up the skills, learning how to work the camera and connect with the right people. Over time, she was invited to shoot for ads and magazine spreads. By 2020, she reached the finals of the Top Russian Beauties competition, a moment that felt like her big break. In a short interview, she admitted she was terrified of being on stage, but she'd entered for the experience. "I just want to stop being afraid. The most important thing is to try still." She didn't win. At 5'5", Greta was considered too short for the big modeling agencies. After the competition, job offers slowed, and soon the money dried up. That's when she decided to shift gears and try her luck as a blogger. She launched a project called Psych Bulletin, a page where she shared thoughts on psychology, self-development, and relationships. Greta didn't have a degree or formal training, but she marketed herself as a personal guide, offering paid sessions and meditation courses. Her content focused on inner peace and building confidence. Even though, privately, Greta was in the middle of a personal crisis. She posted sparingly, and her follower count stayed around 200. Still, she was determined to build a life in the city. Returning to Lipetsk would have felt like admitting failure. On the outside, she looked successful and in control. But inside, anxiety, financial pressure, and loneliness were beginning to take a toll. Her dream was slowly turning into a battle for survival. Just when Greta was starting to find her footing in Moscow, a piece of her past came back. Unexpectedly. Dmitry Korovin, a childhood friend from Lipetsk, reappeared. Back in the day, they'd been inseparable. As teenagers, it felt like real love. Long walks, school dances, late-night talks about the future. They were even voted prom king and queen. But behind the picture-perfect memories were constant clashes, jealousy, blame, and only occasional peace. Even then, their relationship was stormy. After graduation, they drifted apart. Dmitry enrolled in a university in Vladimir but dropped out before long to start his own business. He wanted fast money and total independence. When his first online venture tanked, he was left with debts, but still convinced he was just one idea away from success. That's when he remembered Greta, who by then was already in Moscow and, as it seemed from the outside, on her way up. They reconnected after several years. At first, it was just texts. Then came meetups. The shared history brought back a sense of closeness, and before long, they were together again. For Greta, it felt familiar. Someone from her past she could trust. For Dmitry, it was a lifeline. Someone to lean on when everything else was falling apart. At first, everything seemed calm. Dmitry made frequent trips to Moscow, calling himself a budding entrepreneur and claiming he was just weeks away from launching a new project. Greta supported him, with money, advice, or just by being there. She had a habit of trying to rescue people, and she truly believed that if she stood by Dmitry now, he'd eventually get on his feet and they could finally build a stable life together. But instead of gratitude, he became more dependent, emotionally and financially. When Dmitry finally moved to Moscow for good, he presented himself as a startup founder. In 2017, he found an investor and launched an online platform that, for a short while, brought in real income. During that period, Greta let herself believe that things were finally getting better. For the first time in a long time, their life felt stable. But within a year, the site stopped generating profit. Investors pulled out. The business collapsed. Dmitry was back at square one, broke and directionless. Greta didn't walk away. She gave him nearly all her savings, telling herself it was the right thing to do. He promised to pay her back in full. But his next project barely got off the ground. More failed attempts, more debt, and more fights. By 2020, Dmitry owed over 5 million rubles, more than 1 million of that to Greta. Still, she kept supporting him, paying for rent, food, transportation. Sometimes she had to book modeling gigs or offer coaching sessions just to cover their shared expenses. Meanwhile, Dmitry was drinking more, disappearing for days, and losing control. After every argument, he swore things would change, but within a week, it always started again. Their relationship gradually turned into something darker, something controlling. He checked her phone, demanded explanations, grew jealous even of her co-workers on set. Whenever Greta tried to set boundaries or create space, it ended with threats or emotional blackmail. He accused her of changing, of forgetting who was there for her when she had nothing. But in truth, it was Dmitry who had become entirely dependent on her money, her emotional strength, her presence. Each month, the tension escalated. Greta was exhausted, not just from the financial burden, but from always having to hold everything together. Still, she couldn't leave. She clung to the idea that she could bring back the Dmitry she used to know, the teenage boy she once loved. But to him, Greta was no longer a partner. She had become a lifeline he refused to lose. Friends remembered the conflicts turning more and more public. Dmitri would yell at her in the street, grab her arm, then fall to his knees begging for forgiveness. The aggressive behavior started subtly, after one of their reconciliations. Greta confided in a friend that during fights, he had hit her. But then he'd cry and promise it would never happen again. She never went to the authorities. She never tried to leave. She told people he just needed time to get his life together. But that belief became a trap. The more Dmitri lost control over his own life, the harder he tried to control hers. Jealousy, debt, alcohol, and a lifestyle built on someone else's generosity created a dangerous mix. Boundaries disappeared. Greta stopped being his girlfriend. She became his survival strategy. And Dmitri became someone who couldn't afford to lose the only person still willing to believe in him. It was during this time that their relationship shifted into dangerous territory, a stage where any argument could end in tragedy. By early 2021, what remained between Greta and Dmitri was little more than routine. He was sinking deeper into debt and alcohol. She was doing everything she could to keep up appearances and find new sources of income. But the money disappeared faster than it came in. Her blog, ePsych Bulletin, wasn't profitable, and the occasional magazine photo shoots barely covered a fraction of their expenses. Still, Greta maintained a lifestyle that raised questions. Designer clothes, high-end cosmetics, international trips, cosmetic procedures, and even saving for her own car. How someone who had lost most of her modeling work could afford all this was something only she knew. In Moscow's social circles, rumors had been swirling for a while that Greta worked at a strip club where she met wealthy men. Eventually, she began accepting private invitations, dinners, trips, meetups for money. By all indications, it was escort work, but for her, it wasn't about pleasure. It was survival, a way to preserve the life she had built. She kept this from Dmitri, knowing how jealous and volatile he could be. But the secret came out by accident. One day, Dmitri picked up her phone and found messages. Conversations with men, discussions about meetings and transfers. There were photos, too, from hotels, airports. To Dmitri, it was a bombshell. He didn't explode right away. For a few days, he kept quiet. Then came the blow-up. Accusations, threats, screaming that she had betrayed him. He called her names, accused her of selling herself. Greta tried to explain. The meetings had nothing to do with love or betrayal. She was just trying to survive. But to Dmitri, it was humiliation. The idea that the woman he considered his was living a secret life, one he had no control over, was too much. That discovery broke what little was left of their connection. Jealousy turned into obsession. Dmitri began tracking her movements. He told her to cancel her meetings, demanded she quit her work, and pushed her to go back to what he called a normal life. Greta pushed back. More and more, she talked about ending things for good. She was tired of being his wallet, his emotional anchor, and now, tired of having to explain how she earned her money. Their arguments turned into screaming matches. He told her she had disgraced him, called her a parasite, despite living off her for years. She responded coldly, without emotion. "It's over." For Dmitri, that wasn't a breakup. It was betrayal. Investigators would later find that around this time, Greta started looking for a new place to live. She was making plans to move out. By February 2021, there was nothing left between them but mutual resentment and fear. What had started as a high school love story had become a battlefield. Every new day brought a new argument, or worse. February 2021. Greta had stopped believing there was anything left to save. She booked a room at a Moscow hotel under her own name and stopped answering Dmitri's calls. In messages to close friends, she admitted she was afraid of him, but didn't think he was capable of anything truly dangerous. She just wanted space. But Dmitri couldn't let go. He kept calling, texting from different numbers, even showing up at the hotel. Eventually, Greta answered. Short and cold. Don't come. It's over. But on February 23rd, he came anyway. According to investigators, at first, Greta didn't want to let him in. But when he said he just wanted to talk, she gave in. They went to the nearest store, bought alcohol, ordered dinner, and spent the evening in the room. At first, everything seemed calm. Dmitri claimed he had finally found a way out of his financial mess, promised to pay her back, and asked for forgiveness. Greta listened, expressionless. But soon, the conversation turned to her travels, her income, and those men. Dmitri brought up the messages he'd seen. Greta tried to shut it down, but he kept pushing, accusing her of betrayal. As the night went on, tensions rose. Both had been drinking. Greta reminded him she wasn't going to support him anymore, that he owed her over 1 million rubles, money she gave him for his so-called business ventures. That was the breaking point. According to the case file, Dmitri exploded. He screamed, accusing her of mocking him, of being ungrateful. Greta tried to leave the room, but he blocked the door. The argument turned into a struggle, and then a physical altercation. According to his own confession, Dmitri Korovin admitted he struck Greta multiple times. Then, in a fit of rage, he grabbed a pillow and pressed it against her face. It all happened fast, and he didn't stop, even when she stopped resisting. When he realized she wasn't breathing, he sat on the floor, stunned, in total silence. Later, during questioning, he would tell investigators, "I don't remember what happened. I was drunk. I woke up, and she was gone." The night of February 23rd into the 24th, 2021, marked the end of a story that began back in their school days. What had once passed for love had turned into dependence and fear. And in room 708 of the Korona Hotel in Moscow, silence settled. A silence that would later become the focus of a criminal case. After the incident, Dmitri didn't call emergency services or report what had happened. Instead, he stayed in the room for days. Hotel security cameras show him stepping out only to buy food and alcohol. Greta's body remained on the bed, covered with a blanket. After 3 days, the smell became overwhelming. That's when Dmitri decided to act. He bought cleaning supplies, air fresheners, and a large suitcase. On the evening of February 28th, hotel staff saw him dragging a heavy suitcase down the stairs, wrapped tightly in tape. When asked where Greta was, he replied that she had left and asked not to be disturbed. He walked out of the hotel, got into a car, and headed back toward Lipetsk. He would later tell investigators he had planned to give her a proper burial, but panicked. Once back in Lipetsk, he hid the suitcase in his parents' garage and went on living as if nothing had happened. To keep up appearances, Dmitri started using Greta's phone and social media accounts. He messaged friends, posted updates, and mimicked her voice online. For a while, it worked. People believed she had left for Bali. He later accessed her bank accounts and withdrew roughly 2 million rubles. He used that money to cover his living expenses and fund another failed attempt at launching a business. No one raised any alarms. Greta's mother and grandmother had been out of contact with her for years, and she had few close friends. Months passed before anyone truly questioned her disappearance. Online activity suggested everything was fine. By the summer of 2021, even her digital presence had gone quiet. Dmitri kept a low profile. The suitcase, still sealed, remained hidden under a tarp in the garage, untouched for nearly a year. It wasn't until mid-2021 that a missing person report was filed. A former client, concerned by Greta's silence and increasingly robotic messages, finally contacted authorities. Police opened a preliminary investigation, but technically there was little to go on. Her social media accounts were active, her credit cards were still being used, and there were no signs of international travel. Dmitry stuck to his story, claiming they had broken up. He refused to cooperate with the investigation, and without a search warrant, police couldn't enter his parents' home. Bureaucratic delays and a lack of hard evidence dragged the process out for months. It wasn't until early 2022, following a renewed complaint by the same client, that the case gained momentum again. In March, officers executed a search warrant at the Korovin family home in Lipetsk. In an old garage beneath a tarp, they found the taped-up suitcase. Inside, they discovered the remains of Greta Vedler. Korovin confessed right away. He told investigators that he ended Greta's life out of jealousy, and that he had kept her body close ever since. What had been a missing persons case, barely investigated for nearly a year, was now an uncovered crime. During his very first interrogation, Korovin described everything in detail, calmly, without trying to deny or deflect. His statement matched the evidence, the location, the timeline, the suitcase, and how he removed her body from the hotel. Investigators noted that he remained composed, made no excuses, and simply repeated, "I didn't mean to. I just lost control." He blamed it on jealousy and alcohol. According to his account, Greta had insulted him, reminded him of his debts, and he'd been under the influence. He claimed he didn't even remember how it escalated. A court-ordered psychiatric evaluation later found him mentally competent. Medical professionals noted signs of impulsiveness, emotional instability, and past aggressive behavior, especially when alcohol was involved. Investigators described Korovin as someone heavily dependent, financially, emotionally, and socially. He couldn't function without constant support, but saw that support as something others owed him. When the source of that support vanished, his dependency turned to rage. In the end, it was jealousy, wounded pride, and the fear of losing the only person who still believed in him that triggered everything. The public pressure became too much for his family. His mother, a nurse at the local hospital, was let go shortly after his arrest. Neighbors stopped speaking to them. Rumors spread across town. Eventually, the family had to sell their home and relocate to another region. Friends later said his father couldn't cope with the shame and fell seriously ill. The legal process took nearly a year. Hearings were held in the Lipetsk Regional Court. Korovin pleaded fully guilty and cooperated with the investigation, which sped up the trial. He declined the attorneys his family had hired, saying he didn't intend to defend himself. At the final hearing, he said only, "I deserve this." She's not coming back. In April 2023, the court issued its sentence: 15 years in a maximum security facility. He was also ordered to pay 5 million rubles in compensation to Greta's family. By the time the sentence was handed down, Korovin had already paid about 700,000 rubles, reportedly hoping that partial payments might improve his chances of early release later on. The ruling acknowledged that the crime was committed during a personal dispute and without premeditation, but emphasized the disturbing level of cruelty in hiding the body. The court took his confession and cooperation into account, but also stated that his actions were deliberate, and that his attempts to cover up the crime showed not remorse, but a desire to escape justice. Dmitry Korovin is currently serving his sentence in a high-security correctional facility. He won't be eligible to apply for parole until 2032, after completing 2/3 of his term. According to the Federal Penitentiary Service, he's been compliant, working in the prison's production area, and hasn't broken any rules. However, psychologists warn that the chances of true rehabilitation are slim. Korovin still doesn't fully grasp the magnitude of his actions, and continues to see himself as a victim of circumstance. This is how the story ended, a tale that began as high school love and unraveled into a tragedy that destroyed 2 lives, the one he took and the one he'll never get back.